So we've never done this before, so we'll figure this out as we go along. Does that sound cool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only time I've ever agreed with you. So we're off to the next start.
Cool. Let's get going.
So this is the front of the book.
Are there any wrestling fans here by chance? Professional wrestling's one dude.
Yeah.
One guy.
Yeah, there's some eerie similarities to some wrestlers of my youth in the crowd there.
That's Dusty Rhodes
and Arn Anderson.
Yeah.
Who were very, I don't know, wrestling wasn't that big back then, so I felt safe with, as compared to this today.
Dusty Rhodes is a throwback to the days in wrestling when you could just be a big fat dude and still be a professional wrestler. You don't see so many of those anymore.
But that cover went through, I don't know, it took us a while to settle on that image, didn't it? Because I was kind of in love with the Coach Boss image. That's based on his Coach Boss with his back to us, which ended up being the cover to issue 2. And Jason, for better or worse, for better. I think he was actually right. He really wanted it to have us to use the stick on the cover. He thought it was more evocative of what the book was about, and in the end, I agreed with him. But I had to fight him on that one for a while before I gave in. I couldn't just give in, because if I gave in right away, he would know that he could just win every battle.
Well, that stick is really important. So, you see the stick on every cover of those first 4 covers?
No, it's not on cover 2.
Yeah. We see that stick on most of the covers. So we're really trying to sell how important that stick is and how important that stick will continue to be going forward. I don't know how many people are familiar with Walking Tall, which is a big kind of redneck cinema movie from the 70s, which was based on a true story about Sheriff Buford Pusser, who was a sheriff in Tennessee back in the 60s?
Late 60s or early 70s.
And he was a guy who literally cleaned up his county by carrying a big stick.
Yeah, that's the myth anyway. Yeah,
the Dixie Mob, and then later died in a car wreck. But they made a couple of movies about him and a TV show.
Yeah, they made a couple of movies in the 70s, and then they remade it with The Rock.
Right, don't go see that one. But the original Walking Tall is really good. So the fact that we're selling the stick kind of right from the get-go, right on that first cover, kind of sets you up to think like, okay, I've seen Walking Tall. I think I know how this story's going to go. Though maybe you don't. And Here Was a Man, again, kind of sums up a lot of this first arc in ways that don't become apparent until later. So yeah, it's also the title of a great Deadwood episode and a Johnny Cash song.
Here was a man.
There's a backstory as to why there's a shitting dog that we'll get into later. But one of the reasons why I called up Jason and I said, I feel a little uncomfortable. I don't know why I feel uncomfortable about a dog shitting in the first panel, but since I feel uncomfortable, let's make the reader sign a contract. It basically says, if you keep reading after this, you have no one to blame but yourself. And I just felt like, there was, beyond the constraints of all the things that he wanted to sort of establish in that first panel, which is the church signs and the highway, the atmosphere of entering Crawl County, that image sort of summed up in a way that I could probably never put into words what the book was about. I felt like Jason really channeled something there, and it deserved a little more than just a fleeting glimpse. You have no idea how difficult it is to pull off the tone of a dog taking a shit. I think I drew this whole series. I've drawn that dog taking a shit more times than anything in this entire book, because if you lean it to one hair to the left, it's too funny or it's too gross. And I finally got to a point where I felt like I hit the right level of grotesque yet funny, yet menacing. But you have to be the judge of that, I guess.
Well, I think we can all agree this is by far the best double-page splash ever in comics.
Yeah, of a dog taking a
Does
shit.
somebody have a question?
What I want to know is, was there much debate about whether to include a sound effect?
Oh no!
Sound effect.
Yeah, I don't think that was in the script, but it had to be a plot.
I think the sound effect makes it, yeah. So, and I loved it. I think
That and
it's
he's
your
got a
idea.
hanger.
I think you added the Image Comics Presents too.
I did, yeah.
Which kind of helps sell. Like this is our this is our
The
opening
grandiosity
statement.
of this moment.
Right. Like strap in, motherfuckers.
So that caused reconfiguring that like into a spread at the beginning caused the whole opening scene to sort of like take on a new like it repaced it to some degree, which led to the decision to do the call out of the big barking dog at the end. Originally in the script, that's sort of a, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Eastbound and Down, but if I'm being completely honest, I was probably influenced by Eastbound and Down there. Yeah, Eastbound and Down is a show about a retired baseball player. It comes on HBO, and it's shot in my hometown. It's all set in my hometown.
Yeah,
We liked
Eastbound and
that.
Down has like a cold open.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, they'll kind of freeze frame an image with
Right.
and put the title up there.
You should talk about how many times you changed the fucking name of the county.
We did. I changed it probably 20 times, the name of the county before we settled on Crawl County. We went through a lot. I can't even remember. Some of them really terrible.
Yeah.
And even when we announced the book, it was Castor County, I think, in that first press release. So if you look online, like the earliest thing, it was called Castor County, and I changed it pretty much as soon as we sent that in. I was like, I don't like that.
Yeah, there's some names that, like, instantly when you're working on a thing will stick out to you as, like, I like that, and there's other ones that you come to sort of grow accustomed to. And the name of the county was one.
And it was really important. It was really
Yeah.
important to nail down. Just like, the title of the book is really important. I mean, we knew Southern Bastards as the title of the book really before we knew exactly what the story was going to be. And that title, kind of helped define what the book was going to be about. So, the setting is this entire county. So the entire series will be about exploring this county. So it was very important to nail down what the hell that county is called. And I like Crawl County, but it took a whole bunch of names to get there. And names are hard. Like character names are hard.
Yeah, to get real, put our pinky finger out, like that happens I've always remembered in The Sound and the Fury, like one of the characters gets renamed, and they always talk about how like that ruined his life, that he had one name and they changed his name, and I always think about that when I'm working on a book, when I rename a character. I'm like, well, this is a bad omen.
That was a good Sound and the Fury reference. That will not be the only Sound and the Fury reference we made tonight. So strap in. Yeah, we initially I think I wrote the dog.
It's like your
I don't know.
catchphrase, so strap in.
The dog was initially taking a shit in front of the
That's the best beginning of a
no
sentence ever.
dumping sign, which was maybe a little bit too on the nose.
Well, it's still there.
Right.
It's just that you see it when he turns now,
Right.
like when the camera turns.
And this is the first time we see this dog. It should be obvious right away that it's not just he's not there just so he can take a shit on the opening pages. There's something going on with the dog, as we'll continue to see. We also get the intro of Earl and the setup, him calling somebody on his phone, leaving a message. I tried to sell multiple times when he's talking on the phone. He's not talking to someone. There's nobody on the other end. He's leaving somebody a message. Something else we'll see again. We haven't even named the town yet, this main town in Crawl County. I don't think is actually named in the book. Another Sound and the Fury reference, you can see Compson,
Compson
Bank and
Bank.
Trust. So the Compson family were a big part of William Faulkner's.
A lot of his books, but
What was it like?
Something
Something like that. Yeah, Faulkner had his own fictional county in Mississippi that he wrote about in a lot of his books. And the Compsons were a notable family,
Yes.
or infamous family within that county. So
if you're familiar with that stuff, that's our very obvious call out to them, and that family will show
Right, it's not a one-time thing. We will see the Compsons. Well, if you've read issue 5,
The daughters of the bank.
yeah, you get your first tease of the what Compson characters will play a big part in the book. We see, the first tease of Boss too. You see Boss Hardware and Boss Barbecue, and the question of who the fuck is this Boss guy? And the Tubb mailbox, Earl Tubb, named for country singer Ernest Tubb. For those aficionados of 1950s country music in the audience.
Well, there's also initially a shot of Coach Boss as Earl's yaw haul truck kind of peters around town that passes by the school, and we would see Coach Boss sort of like overseeing his kingdom. And I liked that in the script. I thought it was a really strong moment, but as you'll see as you flip the page, the tree I felt like needed more emphasis, given how important this tree ends up being in the story. I felt like we'd see plenty of Coach Boss moving forward, and maybe keeping him mysterious was a better call in favor of this, because even with an image book, you have theoretically as many pages as you'd like to do, but you still run up against what can you do given the time and energy that you have. So you still have to make very hard choices about those kinds of things.
This first issue was like 29 pages, so it's still a pretty big issue. And this kind of sums up, where Earl is at. Like, he comes back to Craw County after he's been away for a lot of years, and he's a guy who's always lived his life in the shadow of his legendary dad. His dad was this, straight up walking tall figure, this legendary sheriff that carried the big stick. And Earl comes back, and a symbol of how long he's been gone. There's this giant ass tree growing out right out of his dad's grave. So Earl stands there in the shadow of it. So very literally in the shadow of his father. You want to talk about using the red for the flashbacks?
Yeah, that was just a very organic. Also, again, another reference to a book I like. The very first time I read No Country for Old Men, I picked it up because of the cover. Which is, they say, don't judge a book by its cover, but I really was struck by the red and black cover of the softback, of the soft copy version of the book, and it always stuck with me that I wanted to do a book that featured a lot of red, and I felt like, red is a very difficult color to handle. It really hits you in the face, and from an artistic standpoint, it's hard to create nuance with red. And I felt like that kind of, without getting too pretentious about it, I felt like that sort of echoed a lot of what the book was about, was just sort of coming at you directly and then trying to find a way to shave the edges off here and there. And we also just needed a device to separate the past from the present. In a movie or a TV show, it may be a little cheesy to go so extreme, but this is a comic book, and since we were doing such hyper-real sort of story to begin with, I was really concerned that we would move into a territory where things like this were suddenly off the board, where color became too literal, or the representation of the drawing would become too representative of reality. So I wanted to, at least from the beginning, create an excuse to get a little weird here and there when the story permits. So it's a little easier for me to look back in retrospect and assign all these motivations to why I do things artistically, but some of it is just you're in the moment and it just feels right, and you find the reason for it afterwards.
So this is, the first time we see our glimpse of Bert Tubb, Earl's dad in action. We never really see his face, so he's still kind of this mysterious, mythological figure. And we get the headlines, which sort of sum up, his career, which is very much like full-on walking tall. So he was a guy who was battling the Dixie mob, was shot, but kept fighting. It says sheriff shot, but that's not how Bert died. We will explore more about him and his history and his time as a sheriff, and kind of how he, what ultimately happened to him. We'll explore that and on down the road a bit. So he'll continue. He'll be a part of the. He'll be an ongoing character in the book, even though his story ended many years ago.
And from a personal standpoint, my grandmother had a kitchen very similar to this. So I, within reason...
She carry a big stick.
Yeah, she did. Within reason, my grandmother lived in rural North Carolina on a farm. And so within reason, I had to work around the house I designed, but I tried to echo as much of like that experience as possible. Even especially the part on the next, or where young Earl is looking through the screen door there. I got hit in the face by a screen door. It split my head open when I was a little kid, so that probably explains a lot about my life. So there's lots of little personal touches in there. Like somebody came up to me and asked me, they commented on I get a lot of comments on the fishhook door latch, which is a very weird thing that if you didn't grow up with that kind of thing, you would not know. So that little moments like that are sort of like the best victories with this book so far.
We go to Boss Barbecue for the first time.
Were you thinking of the Boar's Nest when you came up with Boss Barbecue? The Boar's Nest is a show called Dukes of Hazzard. I'm sure you all know. And Coach, it just always reminds me of either like Deadwood with the Gym Saloon,
right,
or the Boar's Nest from Dukes of Hazzard.
Well, we certainly needed like a central location. We kind of have three central locations in Crowell County. We got Boss Barbecue, Earl's the Tubb family house, and the high school / football field.
Right.
I think those are the main three. So yeah, Boss Barbecue will definitely be the main location for the book until the last issue. Yeah, the whole time, which is kind of just me. So much of this book is about completely giving in to where I'm from and kind of everything I was raised with and the things I, like we talk about in the opening essay, the things we love and hate, kind of about where we grew up. So it's going full bore for those things that I love, and that's college football and barbecue. Those are like two of the top, and senseless violence.
Yeah, nobody.
So, we're going to lean hard into that shit, the whole time.
If you'll notice, our mascot for Boss Barbecue is a pig carrying a pigskin, eating a pig.
And the first of many cartoon characters.
Many cartoon characters and many kind of cyclical visual references. I'm not going to point those out, but there's lots of that kind of stuff in the book.
The fucking Auburn jersey that he put.
Yeah, this was very important to me that a character have an Auburn jersey because Jason likes Alabama and Auburn is Alabama's rival. Cam Newton is a Carolina Panthers quarterback who also played at Auburn, and people in Alabama call him Scam Newton because he was part of a pretty famous college football
Do we have to
recruiting.
dig into all this?
Yeah, I just like pissing off Jason.
He's a son of a bitch.
I really like pissing off Jason, but I also, if you've read the book, you know what sort of Dusty's fate is. So I also was not being too cruel to Jason. At least he gets some sort of release with that.
What is his tattoo?
He has a tattoo. His tattoo is Albie the Auburn Tiger.
But for legal reasons.
But for legal reasons, he's smoking a joint. So for legal reasons, he's not necessarily Albie.
One of the guys who's a big fan of Southern Bastards is Ryan Khalil, who is starting center for the Carolina Panthers. So the guy who actually snaps the ball to Cam Newton every Sunday, which is really weird.
It is really weird.
It's also the first mention of ribs, and the first of many mentions of ribs. Barbecue ribs. Earl's just polished off a plate of ribs. And then the introduction of Esau Goings, who is sort of eventually see as like Coach Boss's nefarious right-hand man. And the return of the dog. The dog was shitting on the first page. Now he gets pissed on in the second appearance. So make of that what you will. And Esau's neck tattoo was something else.
Yeah, that was a thing we debated back and forth for quite some time.
That tattoo changed many times. I would say, I don't really like what you wrote for the neck tattoo. Like, how about these ideas? And you would instead just draw something else on it.
Because every
And I'd say, I don't really like that one either.
Because you
Why
had
don't we
like
talk about it
dictionary,
before you redraw it?
you had like dictionary definitions you wanted on a guy's neck.
What's the dictionary?
I can't write elephant across the dude's neck every time.
I don't think I suggested elephant. But yeah, we went through a lot of different neck tattoos.
His tattoos were one of the last things I nailed down, I think. Like, I know what they all are and what they all mean, but it took a while to sort of sort out that. And that was sort of the problem with doing the first issue, and the problem with doing any first issue is there's a lot of pressure visually to make decisions that you're going to have to either... You want to stick to most of them. There's some that you're not going to be able to. But Esau's probably morphed as much as any character in the book. And he's really become one of my favorite characters to draw. But he was not easy.
And he's wearing Zubaz pants there
Yeah,
too, right?
I think that was sort of the master stroke. I don't know if you guys have a history with Zubaz pants over here.
If you don't, be thankful that
Yeah,
you don't.
Zubaz pants for like a hot minute in the 90s, like Zubaz was like a giant company. It was like they made these sort of zebra striped themed pants for like football teams and wrestlers, and it was sort of as ubiquitous as a thing could get in the South, I guess.
These days, only an asshole would wear Zubaz, which is why Esau is wearing.
This is why I'm wearing them underneath my pants right now. Next stop is Zubaz pattern tattoos. And there's old Materhead. Which I don't think we had a debate about this the other day amongst ourselves, whether people think the character in the far left corner, Esau's sort of best friend and running mate, is this dude named Materhead. And we were talking the other day about whether or not people actually know his name is Materhead, or they just think that people are calling him Materhead, which is both things are true.
He does call him Materhead in
Yeah.
this scene, I think. But yeah, and he's called Materhead
because he has a sunburnt forehead.
Because he's got a big red head. And you bring the red back for that.
That's sort of the point of no return for Earl there. So
If he just fucking walked out that door,
yeah.
the story would be over and everybody gets a happy ending.
We should do a what if issue where he leaves.
He just goes home.
Yeah, he just goes home and
packs up his shit.
watches
and
reruns
leaves
of
town.
Dallas.
The tree is still there. Nothing.
Never ever write a script where you have a character hit somebody with a fry basket. It was an amazing moment in the script, but it was very, very hard to pull that off.
This is like the money shot, though. This is the really the only action scene.
Yeah.
Well, the biggest action scene in the first issue. One guy hitting another guy with a fry basket, and then Earl with a gun, which I think is the only time we see him with a gun. The whole arc. The old guy pointing a gun and saying, I come for the ribs, kind of sums up the whole book right there.
Yeah, there was no real opportunity to do it. I was going to have Esau sort of picking fries out of his hair for the rest of the book. Maybe like at some point we'll, like issue 8, he finds a fry like it is.
This is where we meet Tad, who's a local kid who's just climbing the tree over Bert's grave.
It was probably one of my favorite characters.
And another cartoon character on his shirt, which now you can actually buy that shirt.
That was very good,
t-shirt.
man.
Product placement.
You're going to be Stan Lee after all.
That's one of the 2 shirts we've actually made. So you can buy Sugar Jug.
Yeah, Sugar Jug is that character on his shirt, which is a brand of sweet tea that has a sort of a Kool-Aid Man mascot named Sugar Jug. And that's a cartoon I did a long time ago, like 2000, well, I guess it's not that long, but 2012 or 2011, and I kind of saved it. Jason called me up and we were talking over the story, and he said, yeah, and then there's this kid who climbs a tree and drives a 4-wheeler, and then when the script came in, he didn't drive a 4-wheeler, and I was really heartbroken by that. So the 4-wheeler made a return.
Second time Earl's calling somebody, leaving a message.
The main thing I remember about this last scene was that Jason kept saying, not enough baseball bats.
Right, you gave one guy like a pipe or
yeah,
something.
lead pipe.
I think your quote was you were worried them looking like what did you say? Some kind of football attack squad. But again, it's kind of fits with the theme of the book. I wanted these guys to, look like they raided a Dick's Sporting Goods to beat somebody's ass. So, they're wearing football helmets to hide their faces, and they're carrying aluminum baseball bats, come to beat the shit out of this guy. And we get the great, 12-panel page, which we kind of call back to that again in issue 4. And you get the first tease of the fact that Earl is a vet. Earl's got a Marine Corps tattoo, and then we get this flashback panel of him as a soldier in Vietnam.
Yeah, and that as a device was something we discussed like from the beginning, that we could do things like that. Like that, you really wouldn't write 12 panels in a Marvel script a whole lot unless you had a lot of communication with somebody. And I'd always as a kid, I flipped through Dark Knight Returns a lot, and I remember that in discussions for a lot of this stuff, we didn't try to actively homage that stuff, but I don't think that I could have done an homage to that book if I tried cognitively, that I would have been as successful. Just in particular in the second issue, but.
Well, I especially like it, pages like that with a whole bunch of panels to sell a big moment like this. Yeah, question?
So why couldn't you do that in a Marvel book?
Well, a lot of it would be...
Getting somebody to draw
It's
it?
actually more difficult to choose... it's basically the difference between directing a movie and directing a TV show, I think. I mean, that's a terrible analogy to compare a comic to that medium, but... choosing things that aren't just heads in relation to one another, or spelling out information, it's a little harder to, like, for example, it was very difficult to. He had a list of a lot of things that he wanted on this page, and I had to narrow that down and reconfigure the order of those things in order to make it read both as one image and try to make it a thing that you could read almost no matter how you attacked it, and that's a very difficult thing to do, is to balance the composition of 12 individual elements that also sort of don't take you out of the story from both standpoints, from both his input and my input. And it really was one of the more energy consuming pages in terms of like thinking through like what does this page need and how minimal can you make the information that you deliver and still get an impact from it. In a Marvel book, you just normally wouldn't have that much communication or that much time to sort of sort through that kind of thing.
Sound effects wise, I like the jumping back and forth between a guy getting beat with aluminum baseball bats and Earl chopping at that tree.
Yeah, from the script, it was very clear in my head, how to make it work. So that's one of the nice things about working with Jason. Most of the time, the scripts are pretty clear.
It's the nicest thing you've ever said about
Well,
it.
for a guy that doesn't draw, he actually does really have a very cinematic mind, or a visual mind. I don't know how much other stuff is in his mind.
Oh, there's a lot of shit in my mind. Yeah, well, this is the first appearance of football in the book, which is a big deal as we cut to Friday night high school football. If you live in a small town in the American South, Friday night's a big deal because that's high school football.
Yeah.
And just that one line of loss of 1 on the play, which is just means the guy got tackled for a loss of 1 yard on the play, but it's also kind of tease of what's to come at the end of this arc. And there's that fucking dog again.
It's a lot more menacing.
Right, whenever there's shit going down, that dog seems to pop up. Just like issue 1, I think I could say this is the best double-page spread of a high school football game ever presented in an American comic book.
It was very important to me. I played high school football, and I've been a football fan my entire life. has always driven me crazy how bad football is in comic books, which is like I'm maybe the only person in the world that it bothers.
Well, it's not in very many comic books.
I know, but every time it's ever been, the only person that's ever come close to doing it or did it fairly well was Jack Davis, and that was so hyper accentuated. Yeah,
Right?
Yeah, and most of the time there was no dramatic purpose for the things that he was drawing related to football. I don't like most sports movies. I don't like most sports stories. I think most of them are kind of they're basically shit. Like there's basically no real redeeming narrative quality to telling a story about football. Once you've seen one, you've basically seen them all. And I mean, that's being rather reductive, but most of the time a documentary, as a dramatic thing. Most of the time a documentary can do the job that a movie would do much better. So one of the things I was very excited about when we came up with this was that football was tied into this in a way that was, I think, dramatically important. On one front, I got to like unintended tackle that this lifelong, sort of want to cross off, like drawing a football game that actually sort of works. And then the other, like, it was within a story where I didn't feel like it was being forced. And I'm kind of lucky in the sense that, like, with high school kids, you kind of get a little more breadth in terms of, like, this is not football at its highest peak. This is not like the Thor and Captain America of football. This is more or less like, football on a level where these kids are still learning how to play. So for every kid that's a god on the football field, there's a schlubby, like, sixth grader. They let sixth graders on the field. But there's a slubby, ninth grade freshman. And that variety, I think, allows you to sort of play dramatically within the context of a game that a reader may or may not understand.
This was also our big action scene for the issue too. I mean, for a crime book, there's kind of a surprising lack of crime for the most part in the first 4 issues. In issue 1, you get Dusty getting the shit beat out of him, which kind of sparks everything. But I mean, there's not a whole lot else.
I'm pretty proud of that fact.
Like nobody gets shot.
Yeah, I at every turn tell him I'm proud of the fact that nobody gets shot in the first 4 issues. I think I have no problem with that in the story, in a crime story, but it's just a thing, I felt it was refreshing to...
Right, a bit different sort of crime.
Yeah.
People will get shot eventually, don't worry. If you're a fan of people getting shot, we'll have that too.
Maybe a football player who gets shot.
Maybe so. And then we also get the introduction here of Coach Boss. For the first time we'd see his ass, see him from behind. Legendary Coach Boss. The football scene was totally different in the script.
It was.
You changed it around a lot.
Some of that was because this is no fault of Jason's, but they were going the wrong way. Like for what the script called for, like when you sat down to like lay out which way the panels should read best, like which way to keep the reader sort of involved in the flow of the page, it didn't make any sense to I had to keep in mind the geography of the actual field, like what was going on.
Because we got to have this guy come stumbling out of the woods at one end of the field at some point, without anybody noticing him right away.
Yeah, so it actually like something that was a limitation or a problem became sort of something that we embraced, and I think we got a lot out of that in terms of at least like adding a little punch to the issue.
So you get some football wackiness. The guy got the shit knocked out of him in a fumble. All this happened as bloody Dusty comes staggering out onto the field. This is all your idea of this. The fumble, bloody Dusty, everything turns into a pile, and then you get the one kid pulling up a bloody shoe out of the pile. And then there's Coach Boss in all his glory, which Coach Boss is clearly influenced by one of the greatest men to ever walk the earth, which would be Paul Bear Bryant, who was the coach of Alabama.
Now that you've told him that he's the greatest man to walk the earth, now tell the story about
One of his less than great moments was he was coach at Texas A&M in the 50s and ran what is this infamous practice where they went to Junction, Texas, which is a utter shithole. It's like being in the desert, and put these kids through hell. Back in those days, it was seen as a sign of weakness if you would want to drink water during practice, so the kids wouldn't have water. And one of the kids almost died of dehydration. And the story was supposedly that when the kid fell out on the practice field, Bear kicked at him and said, "Get this son of a bitch off my field." So that kind of inspires this moment with Coach Boss. So we introduce him with a spit. There's a lot of bodily functions in this.
yeah.
We've got
human or otherwise.
shitting, pissing, and spitting all in the course of an issue and a half. I'm sure somebody vomits at some point too. So that's still to
It's
come.
coming up even if it hasn't happened
So
yet.
strap in.
That's the first meeting or re-meeting between Earl and Coach Boss.
Yeah, we don't even know. We don't know if they've ever met before. Even later issues, we never see them face to face. But yeah, for the first meeting, first face to face. And Esau, what kind of shirt is Esau wearing there? Is that a Hank Jr. shirt?
Yeah. Who I'm not a fan of, but Esau would totally be a fan of Hank Jr.
Esau has a pretty extensive T-shirt collection, as we see over the course of this art. This is when we first meet the sheriff of Carl County, who will be a big, continue to be a big part of the book going forward. This is a guy, the sort of present day version of Bert Tubb. He's manning the same job that Bert Tubb had back in the day. And then as Earl learns, this guy also was a football star and played football for Coach Boss, presumably. So that's going to be a big part of his story too. One thing we had to change is Latour drew a fucking RoboCop stitch for no reason.
No, there was a reason. But it's a big spoiler. I can't tell the reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
It was
no-
called foreshadowing, but somebody doesn't
no
like RoboCop.
RoboCop.
So if you're playing at home, this is the point where Earl has what may be a mystic encounter, may not be. And this was sort of what made this whole book come together for us, I think, on some level. We've been circling the idea of doing a crime fiction book for a long time. And Jason knew he wanted a football coach, crime boss, and we kind of settled on the idea of Carl County being, full of bastards. It was the worst county in Alabama, or the worst county in the South. But personally, I don't know, we both, I felt like we just didn't quite have a hook yet. We didn't know how to introduce people into that world quite yet. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah, we knew the walking tall of it, we knew the bastards of it, but we didn't know that kind of the hook for this opening arc.
So when we were approached, with an open door to come pitch the book to Image, we sort of, sat at a convention for a whole weekend and sort of batted around ideas. And I was initially a little reticent to do an ongoing book. I'd just never done anything of this size before, so I kept trying to convince Jason to do something a little smaller. At one point we started batting around the idea of a Western, and the Western was influenced by the fact that, and here comes that shitting dog, I had a neighbor who had allowed their dog to basically shit in my yard for months. And one day I come outside and I'm in a hurry, and there's the most impressive pile of shit you've ever seen in your life, like a mountain of turds with a giant twig growing out of it. It was like something, like someone had terraformed a mountain of shit. And just like in my frustration, I was like, no, I would never beat a dog, but I was like, I should just go get a jug of water and water this twig until it grows into a tree, and then I'll snap off a branch and go beat that dog's ass. And I told Jason that like if we were going to do a Western, like maybe what we should do is a story where maybe like a father gets killed and a tree grows out of his grave and the son comes home. And I always liked the natural. So I felt like, you know, the idea of a tree being hit by lightning and that the main character maybe ascribes an importance that may or may not be there to that moment. And Jason was smart enough to instantly know, like, oh, you friggin' idiot. Like, this isn't a Western. This is the Southern Bastards book that we've already been putting together for 3 years. And I feel like that was the moment where I knew, like, yeah, we should do this. So there's your dog shitting. There's the significance of the dog taking
See,
shit.
there was a reason you had a dog shitting. Yeah, and I love that this is, you know, as Earl miraculously pulls a stick out of the wreckage of this fucking tree. I like that you can read this moment as, you know, maybe this is something supernatural happened. This is sort of the influence of Earl's dead father. Or it's just the tree getting struck by fucking lightning. It has nothing to do with anything mystical. I remember writing this page and thinking, this is the most fucking Frank Miller thing I've ever written. There's rain and there's lightning and a big splash, silent splash of him with his pulling the stick out where it's still fucking steaming.
To such a degree.
I felt like Frank for like 5 seconds.
Yeah, to such a degree that when I read it, like in my mind, this was always a quiet moment. This was always like he went to bed and, you know, got up the next morning and the tree had been hit by lightning. So when I got the script, I was like, holy fuck! Like he gets blown up by lightning? Like what the... It wasn't that I was against it, it just was so, you know, it was the right call, but it was a little bit different than what we discussed,
Right.
maybe.
Well, this was also originally the end of issue 1.
Yeah.
This was all supposed to happen in issue 1, and as I sit down to write issue 1, it's like, there's no fucking way.
Yeah.
Like, it really needed more room. I mean, issue 1, even as it was 29 pages. In retrospect, I'm really glad we broke that apart. That would have been a disaster. But I first, it really took me a while to get past the fact that we couldn't get to this moment, you know, right out of the gate. But it worked out better. Yeah, there's another bit with Bert Tubb, where we still don't really see his face. He's still just sort of this faceless mythic figure. Another red flashback too. And this is Earl like leaving home as he heads off to Vietnam. There's your money shot. Big stick and another mention of ribs. Shit just writes itself.
I mean, there's not really a lot to say about these other than, like, they were pretty fun to draw. You know, when you do a comic, a lot of times you're like, was that enough action? You know, like it's only, you know, we only got to see Earl fight for like 3 pages. So
Right, especially since this is kind of what we were selling, like from the cover of issue 1.
yeah,
Is a guy swinging a big stick. This is really the first time we get to them.
Meet Storm Mondays. Yeah, the menus there are meant to call out the passage of time.
Right, the time jump. You know, just to set up. Earl comes in, thinks he kicks some ass. You know, this is where he's from. He knows a lot of the people who live here. He thinks if somebody just stands up to these bastards who are ruining Carl County, that other people will stand up as well.
Yeah, he's in some ways really not looking to do his dad's job other than to, you know, rally people.
Exactly. He's not looking to be a one-man army to change things. He thinks he can kind of turn the tide. And it'll be a little easier, but with the time jump we see, he's calling for people to rally to him. Nobody shows up. You know, this is he's gonna have to do this by himself.
Well, somebody shows up.
Right. Tad shows up wearing a different cartoon character T-shirt.
That character's name's Bocephus, the karate chicken.
I got nothing after that. I can't follow that.
I thought this was a rather important moment in the script where you know, Esau and Materhead kind of come to Coach Boss and say, you know, there's this jerk and he's in town and he's hitting people with sticks. and Coach Boss really just is more concerned with football than he is, anything else, and sort of casually gives the order, like, yeah, get rid of him. Like, what the fuck do I keep you around for?
And this was probably the moment in the whole series so far where it's very much me talking through the character as he's bitching about
This is your Mary Sue moment.
hurry up, no huddle offense, which I could go on about that for a few hours, but we should probably skip that. It's just like a total football nerd moment of
But I think we get a
old
real
school
sense.
style of football versus modern day stuff.
I think we get a real sense of what's important to Coach Boss there in a very small window,
Right, he's a straight up old school football guy, just like me. Earl leaving another message. I was really trying to drive that home. Like, who the fuck is he talking? Who is he calling? And look, his battery's dying. Wonder what that. Wonder what I was trying to say there. Time's running out.
Mama's Family.
That's a real show.
Yeah, there's a show at home called
We're gonna get
Mama's Family.
We're gonna get sued for that. As you can see, like, Earl's got everything packed up. He had everything packed up in the truck, and then Tad came along and cracked it open and brought the TV back in because he really wanted to watch Mama's Family.
He's the only person alive that still wants to watch Mama's Family.
Right.
And the first gun violence in the book kills the television.
TV gets shut, right? Vietnam flashback. We talked about doing a Vietnam flashback from the beginning.
Yeah, originally it was much more expansive, but I think this was the right call.
Right, it didn't need to be longer, but I really liked showing Earl in Vietnam and showing that he had no intention of ever going back to where he grew up from.
Yeah, I think they don't teach you, when you're coming up in superhero comics, is how to draw characters across time jumps. So that took some figuring, like how to, make it somewhat clear that that's Earl visually moving forward. And it's another thing that'll rear its head in that second arc with Coach Boss.
And not only they beat the shit out of Tad, they trashed the Tubb family home, graffitied it, even trashed the Yaw Hall truck. He's not going to get his deposit back on that truck. And that's like the everything with Tad is he was always trying to come over and watch TV because his grandmother won't let him watch TV because the devil lives in it. So that's Earl's little gesture of goodwill there that he turns the TV on for him before he leaves his hospital room. And Tad is not dead. We'll see him again.
Tragic
phone call.
inevitability here.
Yep, last message. Earl really wishes somebody would call him back.
From a script standpoint, I mean, this is the town sort of gathering to like witness. Earl's been coming into town for weeks now, or for days now, and sort of like causing ruckus and asking people to rise up with him. But instead, they've come to sort of witness, Esau and Materhead and the boys, kick the shit out of Earl, which I think is a very important idea, like moving forward in the series. The idea that the town folk, this is the way they feel about an outsider coming into town and trying to sort of, change the way they should behave.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even though Earl grew up here, he's been gone for so long. They still view him as an outsider. So yeah, this is like clearly this is everything building, to a head. This is high noon. Everybody in town's waiting to see, what the hell is going to happen here. And of course, even the dog shows up, barking like crazy. And this is Earl's last appeal. His last appeal to the people of Crawl County and saying, I know you people. I know there are good people here. Like, you can't all be happy with the way shit is going. His last desperate appeal, and what does he get in answer? But a rock to the head. So whatever happens here, Earl is gonna have to stand alone.
And of course he does against a mob of dudes that are probably half his age.
Right.
So at this point, you could, you very easily make the argument that, I mean, we're in spoiler territory, but what happens with Earl moving forward was not a thing. Not many people would have lasted to this point.
Clearly this is a callback to that moment at the end of issue 1 when we did the 12-panel page. Now we double that up, so you get the same sort of setup as it's cutting back and forth between the present day and flashbacks. The present day action, if you follow it along just that, this is, Earl getting the shit beat out of him, but then the dog sort of intervenes and helps him out, and Earl starts to turn the tide. And the flashbacks are, it's kind of his life flashing before his eyes. We get recent stuff. We get, flashbacks to him as a football player, to him as a vet, as a soldier in Vietnam. And we get him fumbling with a woman's breast.
This is a very mind-bending couple of pages. I'm not going to really walk anybody through it, but it was designed to read in multiple different ways. You put any two images side by side, and you kind of create a third context, so you can multiply that by 24.
I love these pages. I think that again, it's a whole bunch of panels for a big moment, but it tells the story to me better than if we'd done 5 pages with three panels each of Earl fighting these guys off.
Yeah.
I love doing lots of little glimpses of these big moments to tell quite a lot of story.
Would you argue that, I think fight scenes in comics are largely emotion driven, even in a superhero comic, the best
ones,
punches
sure,
you remember are sort of emotional beats where
Absolutely, yeah.
and we would have kind of belabored that point had it ended up being 24 pages of now Earl throws a dude through the window and jumps out the window, and then he jumps back through the window that he just.
It didn't need to be that kind of fight scene, sure. Yeah,
it would have turned into a Rube Goldberg machine. And there's little things that we see Bert's face for the first time, and we get one of those rare glimpses of Earl's eyes. There's things within the.
You don't see much of Earl's eyes.
Yeah.
The whole time. He's very squinty. He should probably get some glasses. You better hurry though. Earl fights his way. That's all he was trying to do, was fight his way in the Boss Barbecue. Since he first came in with that stick in hand, he says, I'm coming back here every fucking day until I get some answers. So he manages to fight his way through all these guys with the help of that dog to get inside, and who does he find waiting for him? Polishing off some ribs, but Coach Boss.
Old Scratch.
Old Scratch. So we only saw these two characters together for a page in issue 2. So this is the first time we get a big moment between the two of them. And Earl reveals that he remembers Coach Boss as some scrawny kid who's trying to make the football team. That memory clearly doesn't sit well with Coach Boss. And I like the little beat of Coach Boss dropping the bone back onto the plate. That wasn't in the script. That was all Latour.
Some things are just page mechanics, sometimes you just need a moment or a mechanism to get your eye to the place that you want it to go to, and it just seemed like a natural thing to include.
And the shit is on now. I love that this art comes down to one old man fighting another old man. You don't see enough of that in comics.
You don't see enough of that in real life.
Last chance to back out now. There'll be spoilers ahead. Strap in, motherfuckers. If you guys stay.
It's interesting as well, the colour palette drops away, so it's these reds and sort of muted browns. There's maybe 5 colours, 6 colours on that.
Yes, this is a sort of a convergence between, the present and the past. Yeah. And
everything. Dog barking, lightning again. It's all coming together. And it ain't looking too good for Earl. And now his fucking phone starts ringing. And even the dog's the last one to like give up on Earl. Like the dog saying, "Man, I tried to fucking warn you. Like, why do you think I was here all this time?" And now we get
what seemed
ouch.
like the end.
There's a big fucking dent in his face and his head.
The funny thing about this is, and look, I apologize if there's anybody in the crowd who, feels misled that maybe he wasn't dead or maybe the end wasn't clear enough. But I've learned
a lot of people
that you
thought the end
cannot
wasn't
draw a dude's head caved in grotesque enough for people. I mean, I really feel like people have been preconditioned to the point of like accepting that the hero is just gonna get up and dust himself off. That literally we would have had to go on to an extent that I think would have been tasteless, And that was a tough thing to balance here because like nobody cared about Earl more than Jason and I, and had we gone to the extreme of maybe having his brain crack out of his head or something like that, I feel like it would have maybe he needed some sort of nobility to his death. I felt like I don't know. It just felt like the right level to me.
I thought we were pretty obvious there.
Oh, I did too, but
But yeah, a lot of people still had questions, including my mom. My mom was texting me constantly, like, "He's not really dead, is he?" Sorry, Mom. And some people thought, well, he'll just be in a coma, right? Like that was better. Like he'll just be in a coma.
But we did discuss the possibility that people that there should be, if there was ambiguity here, that it was okay. Because it would be cleared up in the next issue.
Right, it's answered.
And as an ending to the first arc, it's a good cliffhanger.
Right, we just wanted you to flip the page and say, "What the fuck?" The clues were right there from the beginning.
Yeah, to us, we felt like it was telegraphed.
I thought I'd given it away by issue 4. I thought everybody would know. Like, hey, he's dead. But I mean, again, the book's called Southern Bastards. That's your first clue, that this is a book about the bastards. It's not Walking Tall. The other one is the arc is called Here Was a Man, so it's not just talking about Bert. It's talking about Earl.
And we also knew that this was not our real. Like this was a big card we played, but it wasn't the only card we were going to play in this arc.
Right, and that's the other one is from the first issue you get this question, this lingering question of who the fuck is he calling, or why is he always calling somebody we don't know who it is? So. The fact that question was out there would seem to be another big clue. And now, hopefully, everybody who made it to that point didn't just throw the book down in disgust and walk away. That they flipped the page and saw, hey, there's something else. And now we finally get our answer of who was on the other end of all those voicemails Earl was leaving. It's his daughter. And she's got a big ass machine gun. So that's that's kind of clearly one of the main points of this first arc. That we just get a tease of her here at the very end. Her story doesn't come in issue 5. It doesn't come in issue 6. Doesn't come right away. This is kind of something we'll be teasing and developing as things go along. I mean, this is kind of the overall arc of the series is building towards her story. So we'll get a little more of her as we go along, and it'll kind of start to build and build and build. But she's in Afghanistan. She doesn't even know her dad is dead yet. She's not going to show up in Crawl County right away, but chances are at some point she's going to show up.
They're pretty high. Right.
They're pretty high that she's going to show up and want to know what the fuck happened to her dad, and is going to,
But this is also a moment
for some answers.
where I felt like we had to do this series when we came to this conclusion that like this is who was on the other end of the phone and how she related to his life and how she related to the book in general. I don't want to get too into that sort of stuff, but we felt like there was an expectation, or at least I did. There was an expectation of what this book was, that I think we went to a very measured and purposeful choice of like why it ended up being this person on the other end of the phone. That I think we get a lot out of, and really throws the book, hopefully turns it on its head in a way where by the time we get to her story, there'll be things that we haven't explored with Earl.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for the most part, these first 4 issues were about old
men fighting and
I mean,
dog shit.
There's one female character who has speaking lines, and she's a waitress at Ball's Barbecue. So
yeah, we felt the promise of
Right.
this was very important. That we're very aware of what we've presented so far, and that we're not, that it's going to be more than just what you've seen. I think.
Right.